If you love nostalgia and have ever wondered what happened to those quirky soda flavors from decades past, then stick around. Today we're cracking open a time capsule of lost fizzy favorites. Some you might remember from childhood road trips, others you may only know from old commercials. Whether you grew up in the era of drive-in diners, backyard barbecues, or 8-track tapes, get ready for a sweet and bubbly ride back to the 20th century. From classic colas to experimental fruit infusions, these vanished drinks still spark cherished memories of simpler days. Number 1. Crest. Born in the 1930s, Crest once stood proud among America's earliest attempts to offer an entire rainbow of soda flavors to a country rapidly expanding its palate. During that era, the United States was bouncing back from the Great Depression, and local bottling plants were springing up in small towns, each one trying to carve out a piece of the growing soda market. Crest capitalized on the public's hunger for sweet, effervescent drinks by churning out a whole lineup. Crest Orange, Crest Grape, Crest Strawberry, and more, each labeled with bright, eye-catching graphics that brought cheer to grocers' shelves. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, Crest commercials appeared in black and white newspapers, touting a fresh, fruit-forward taste, right when baby boomers began to shape how families stocked their kitchen pantries. In many of these households, Crest sodas served as a beloved treat on weekends or after a long day at work, appealing to anyone who wanted a vivid burst of flavor in an era still discovering mass-produced convenience foods. By the 1960s, however, bigger players were consolidating the market, funneling more money into national ad campaigns featuring celebrities and futuristic jingles. Crest, predominantly reliant on regional distribution and small-scale marketing, struggled to keep pace with the well-funded giants. By the early 1970s, Crest had retreated into pockets of the Midwest, where older mom-and-pop groceries still displayed its distinct glass bottles. Gen X kids in these areas sometimes talk about sneaking a bottle from a family fridge, sipping the tangy liquid while flipping through vinyl records or watching old Hollywood matinee broadcasts on television. Eventually, even these last strongholds dried up, leaving Crest a fond memory for those who recall the swirl of bright fruit flavors and quaint vintage packaging. While a few collectors hunt for unopened bottles or retro signage at antique fairs, the brand itself all but vanished from mass production. Today, it stands as a nostalgic icon of simpler times, when local bottling companies dotted the landscape and flavor experimentation often led to short-lived yet charming additions to the American soda tapestry. Number 2. Donald Duck Cola. Though often overshadowed by the Disney Empire's iconic films, Donald Duck Cola was a genuine brand collaboration that arose in the 1940s and carried on through parts of the 1950s. With Disney's character licensing, small bottlers seized the chance to place the irrepressible duck's face on glass soda bottles, hoping to lure families looking for a dash of whimsy in their fizzy drinks. America during the 1940s was hungry for uplifting images, and cartoon mascots helped lighten the mood post-Depression and during World War II. Baby boomers who grew up just after the war often talk about spotting Donald Duck Cola in their corner stores, with bright labels that promised quacky refreshment. Its taste wasn't drastically different from other colas of its day, sweet, caramel-tinted, and offering that bracing fizz reminiscent of early fountain drinks. But the novelty of Disney branding gave it a unique charm. Radio commercials featuring catchy jingles and references to Donald's well-known temper made an appearance, drawing in children who recognized the beloved cartoon from Sunday comics or short reels shown before old movies. Despite the brand's initial success, the expanding soda landscape soon overshadowed the whimsical duck. Larger companies began forging exclusive national contracts, pushing smaller beverages to the fringes. By the early 1960s, Donald Duck Cola was receding from stores, replaced by bolder, more heavily promoted colas. A few local bottlers hung on, but eventually even they shifted focus. Today, collectors scour flea markets for original bottles or promotional stands, each one bearing the cheery cartoon duck. This relic speaks to a golden age of American nostalgia, linking old Hollywood glamour and mid-century memories, when even daily groceries could spark delight for a generation raised on Disney magic. Number 3. Mason's Root Beer. Tracing its origins back to the 1930s, Mason's Root Beer was among the wave of root-based soft drinks that aimed to stand out through old-timey charm and authentic flavor. In that era, a visit to the local soda fountain was a special treat, one that bridged grandparents' memories of Prohibition-era sarsaparilla stands with a new generation of baby boomers discovering the wonders of carbonated indulgences. Mason's Root Beer carved a niche for itself by marketing a deeper, richer sassafras taste, accompanied by rustic label art that evoked frontier nostalgia. Into the 1940s and 1950s, Mason's Root Beer was served in tall, frosty mugs at roadside diners where families would stop on weekend drives, a pastime made increasingly popular by the booming automobile culture. The brand had just enough presence to infiltrate smaller regional advertising spaces. It wasn't uncommon to spot signs reading, "We've got Masons" in local shops. By the 1960s, as American nostalgia centered around rock and roll and the unstoppable growth of suburban sprawl, Masons attempted to keep pace with new soda heavyweights. However, the 1970s saw fierce competition, with major soft drink corporations taking over bottling plants across the nation. Masons, lacking the budget to reinvent itself for a changing audience, slowly lost shelf space. Memories of Mason's frothy head and sweet, spicy aroma lived on for those who recalled sipping it on a muggy summer day, while a transistor radio played doo-wop tunes in the background. Ultimately, by the early 1980s, the brand had all but vanished, a casualty of acquisitions and streamlined product portfolios. Today, original Mason's bottles and neon signs are highly coveted collector's items, symbolic of a bygone era when every little town seemed to have its own twist on the beloved root beer tradition. Number 4. Team. The 1960s unleashed a wave of lemon-lime sodas into the mainstream, and Team was Pepsi's challenger in that increasingly crowded market. Baby boomers and early Gen Xers remember Team commercials featuring cheerful suburban cookouts, complete with checkered tablecloths and transistor radios broadcasting the latest Beatles hits. The product pitched itself as crisp, invigorating, and just a bit sweeter than its direct rivals. That tangy, effervescent rush appealed to the carefree spirit of the decade, offering a bright alternative to heavier colas. Families would toss a case of Team into the picnic basket, and kids would pop open the bottle while perched on the grass, daydreaming of new bicycles and rock and roll stardom. As the 1970s rolled on, Team found itself in a dogfight with other lemon-lime behemoths that boasted bigger ad budgets and sleeker marketing tie-ins to sports, pop culture, and even Hollywood celebrity endorsements. Though some loyal fans insisted that Team's taste was unmatched, lighter on citrus acid, heavier on sweetness, Pepsi's shifting priorities meant Team got fewer promotional dollars as the company bet on more established names. By the early 1980s, Team distribution was scaled back significantly. While it persisted in a few international markets, it faded from many American grocery aisles, replaced by flashier, more heavily marketed lemon-lime colas that hogged prime shelf space. Today, the mention of Team triggers recollections of vinyl record players spinning in a living room, polka dot dresses at neighborhood block parties, and a simpler time when the fizz of a new lemon-lime soda could capture the hearts of an entire community. Collectors occasionally spot Team bottles in antique shops, prompting nostalgic sighs from those who recall clinking glass bottles on a warm Sunday afternoon. Number 5. Kick. In the 1970s, soda companies leaned hard into high-energy branding and bold graphics, and Kick was a prime example of that trend. It promised a jolt of caffeine combined with a vibrant citrus flavor, arriving in vivid green cans splashed with lightning bolt designs that beckoned thrill-seeking teens. The brand's commercials were pure adrenaline. Skateboarders zipping down suburban sidewalks, disco-era neon swirling in the background, an announcer shouting about how Kick could power your day. Baby boomers who were transitioning into their teenage years at this time remember saving pocket change just to grab an icy can from the local gas station cooler before heading off to meet friends. Despite the kinetic image, Kick faced an uphill battle. Bigger soda giants poured huge sums into marketing, championing their own citrus caffeine combos, leaving Kick overshadowed in many supermarkets. The brand attempted tie-ins with emerging rock bands and some local radio stations. But by the dawn of the 1980s, the market was saturated with extreme flavors, promising that elusive burst of energy. As a result, Kick's distribution thinned, slipping first from national grocery chains, then from convenience stores, until only a few regional bottlers offered it. Over time, even those local lines disappeared, leaving behind a handful of promotional items, posters, t-shirts, a smattering of radio ads, scattered across nostalgic corners of the internet. People who once drank Kick often reflect on the neon-soaked vibe of the 1970s, a cultural moment when rock and roll, vivid color palettes, and the lure of late-night hangouts shaped an entire generation's sense of adventure. For those old fans, the memory of Kick remains entwined with carefree youth. Back when grabbing a high-voltage citrus soda felt like a small rebellion against the norm. Number 6, Dr. Wells. Root beer and spiced colas thrived in mid-century America, but Dr. Wells strove to carve its own path by advertising a distinct herbal bite that set it apart from the mainstream. Introduced around the 1930s and managing to hold on well into the baby boomer era, this soda found a modest but devoted audience across certain regions of the Midwest and South. It was typically sold in tall glass bottles with a pharmacist-like logo, a nod to the era when many sodas originated in drugstores. The early commercials exuded a modest charm, featuring smiling, apron-clad mothers pouring Dr. Wells at family barbecues, while doo-wop tunes or big band music played in the background. In the 1950s and 1960s, Dr. Wells made appearances in local drive-in movie theaters, often accompanied by comedic intermission ads that teased its mysterious formula. By the 1970s, though, competition from bigger doctor-named beverages and a flourishing soda market led to diminishing sales. Younger generations gravitated to flashier brands with dynamic logos and big-name celebrity endorsements. Dr. Wells, with its relatively low-key marketing budget, struggled to capture that wave of modern pop culture mania. Sporadic attempts at rebranding, such as introducing more playful packaging, did little to stop the slow fade. By the 1980s, few stores carried Dr. Wells, and new mass-marketed root beers pushed out smaller spiced colas. Today, discovering an old doctor. Wells' sign in an antique shop is akin to stumbling upon a time capsule from America's golden age of family diners and road trip pit stops. For some baby boomers, the memory of Dr. Wells conjures a wave of nostalgia for those small, community-focused celebrations, where simply cracking open a bottle promised a cozy sense of tradition that modern colas rarely replicate. Number 7. Sun Crest. Established in the 1930s by the National New Grape Company, Suncrest encompassed a medley of fruit flavors, but most famously a punchy orange soda that became a staple in many American households throughout the mid-20th century. Baby boomers who grew up in the 1950s often remember rummaging through the family refrigerator in search of that bright orange bottle on a humid summer day. Local newspapers from the era carried small advertisements touting Suncrest's sunny taste, and radio programs occasionally squeezed in short sponsorship messages, proclaiming it the perfect drink for a carefree afternoon. By the 1960s, as suburban life blossomed, families across the country were grilling hot dogs in backyards and pairing them with frosty bottles of Sun Crest. However, once the 1970s arrived, major soda conglomerates began consolidating their product lines at record speed, pumping funds into high-profile marketing campaigns that featured everything from rock music tie-ins to elaborate Hollywood-style commercials. Sun Crest simply couldn't match the clout of these emerging juggernauts, gradually losing distribution deals. While it hung on in certain southeastern regions, the brand was mostly overshadowed by the bigger names that controlled convenience store coolers. Even as some local bottlers attempted to keep the spark alive, shifting tastes and corporate acquisitions spelled doom for widespread availability. By the early 1980s, spotting a Sun Crest was a rarity. Older consumers still reminisce about its more pronounced citrus flavor, describing it as sharper and more refreshing than many modern orange sodas. For collectors of vintage soda memorabilia, Sun Crest signage and crates serve as vibrant reminders of a once thriving market, saturated with smaller brands that gave each community its own unique flavor identity. Number 8. Wink. Hitting shelves in the early 1960s, Wink styled itself as a grapefruit-based soda, aiming to capture the crowd craving something more tart than sweet. Tagged as the sassy one, Wink tapped into an era when more adult-oriented sodas were cropping up, bridging the gap between sugary pop for the kids and refined beverages for older taste buds. It came in a greenish, citrus-hued can that signaled a departure from the neon oranges and reds dominating many fruit drinks. Boomers remember 1960s Wink commercials featuring breezy outdoor scenes, couples picnicking by a lake, transistor radios pumping out the new rock and roll, and a narrator boasting that Wink was the refreshing pick-me-up for a modern generation. Early on, Wink enjoyed decent popularity, partly because grapefruit sodas weren't yet oversaturating the market, and consumers were intrigued by a sharper, tangy taste that felt more grown up. But with the proliferation of lemon-lime sodas, colas, and artificially colored fruit flavors, Wink's slice of the soda pie began to shrink. By the 1970s and 1980s, competition from established citrus drinks ramped up, and distribution networks favored bigger sellers. Wink lingered in a few pockets of the country, where longtime fans insisted that no other soda matched its crisp, tart punch. Yet large beverage corporations were less inclined to maintain a niche product on a national scale. As the 20th century advanced, Wink's original formula and packaging became harder and harder to find, rendering it a nostalgic footnote in the broader tapestry of mid-century American soda adventures. A dedicated group of enthusiasts occasionally debates whether a small selection of grapefruit drinks hitting the shelves today can measure up to Wink's distinctive flavor. But for those who grew up with the sassy one, no modern imitation truly captures that magical 1960s tang. Number 9. Happy Cola by Canada Dry, limited run. Introduced briefly in the late 1970s by Canada Dry, better known for ginger ale, Happy Cola was an attempt to expand beyond traditional ginger-based beverages. The name alone conveyed lighthearted fun, evoking the era's obsession with vibrant branding that aimed to hook both boomer parents and their Gen X kids. The packaging leaned on bright colors and whimsical lettering, intended to exude positivity at a time when the soda aisle was brimming with loud, catchy logos. Marketing materials pinned Happy Cola as the perfect companion for pool parties, teenage hangouts, and any scenario requiring an instant boost of good cheer. While some people reported that the flavor had a slightly sweeter profile than leading colas, with perhaps a faint echo of ginger hidden beneath the caramel notes, distribution remained sporadic. Canada Dry's core ginger ale business overshadowed this new, riskier brand extension, and major retailers were hesitant to stock it in large volumes. As a result, only certain regions across the United States encountered Happy Cola, mostly for a fleeting period. By the early 1980s, this foray into the cola category ended quietly. In some ways, Happy Cola exemplifies how big beverage companies in the late 20th century tested waters outside their comfort zones, only to retract if the product failed to spark broad consumer loyalty. For older fans, glimpses of the name conjure images of pastel summer dresses, transistor radios playing disco hits, and a collective sense that an ice-cold soda could momentarily make life a bit more carefree. A few leftover Happy Cola cans occasionally resurface in online auction listings, prompting curious questions about why something with such a hopeful name disappeared so silently. Today, it remains a hidden gem within the annals of vintage soda history, rarely recognized yet warmly remembered by the select few who actually tasted its fleeting fizz. Number 10. West End Soda. Despite its name suggesting a chic metropolitan aura, West End soda emerged in the late 1950s in small-town bottling plants scattered across Middle America. Unlike single-flavor brands, West End offered a rotating lineup: cola, lemon lime, grape, cream soda, all sold under the same brand identity but with distinct labels featuring retro fonts and stylized cityscape silhouettes. At a time when the big coastal cities exerted massive cultural influence, West End soda's marketing played on the notion that even the smallest towns could enjoy an air of cosmopolitan flair by sipping a sophisticated beverage. Boomers recall seeing West End ads in local movie houses, running just before newsreels or black and white cartoons, often accompanied by big band or early rock and roll tunes. By the 1960s, West End soda had begun penetrating a few larger markets, thanks to cost-effective prices and grassroots word-of-mouth endorsements from families who wanted something new. Yet the 1970s brought fierce competition from the top soda conglomerates, each launching major ad campaigns on national TV. West End, unable to match these marketing budgets, found its foothold slipping. Younger consumers were dazzled by the flashy endorsements of bigger beverages, linking themselves to famous musicians, Hollywood icons, or grand sporting events. By the late 1970s, many bottlers that once produced West End soda pivoted to more stable contracts with the juggernauts. A handful of local shops held onto stray cases into the early 1980s, clearing old stock for loyal customers who swore by its crisp carbonation and nostalgic label designs. Eventually, the brand disappeared from retail entirely. These days, West End soda remains a half-forgotten chapter in America's 20th century beverage chronicles, overshadowed by the marquee names, but still treasured in recollections of those baby boomers who prized the brand's underdog spirit. Whenever an old sign or cooler surfaces at an estate sale, it inspires a wave of wistful reminiscing about a time when even the smallest soda companies dared to dream big, hoping to quench the nation's thirst with a dash of style and small-town heart.